Welcome everyone. First, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to view this presentation. In this video, you'll learn about my internship experience that was created in part of the Educational Technology Program for the University of Loyola in Maryland for the fall 2018 semester. To begin, let me introduce myself. My name is Gabrielle Antolfi, and I work at Logan Elementary School, which is located in Dundalk, Maryland. We are part of the Baltimore County Public School System, and I'm currently teaching 5th grade English Language Arts. I've been teaching for 6 years, and I've taught 3rd, 4th, and 5th grades throughout all of my years teaching. I'm also a graduate student at Loyola University in Maryland. Logan Elementary has grades pre-K through 5 in our building. We are a Title I school, and we have a pretty diverse population within our community. As working at a Title I school can be pretty difficult, teacher turnover is fairly common. So this year we have about 18 new staff members, which includes classroom teachers, special area teachers, resource staff, and even a new assistant principal. The majority of our staff are not only new to our school, but they are new to teaching in general. So after analyzing our school, there seems to be a lot of teachers just in the entry and adoption stages in the ACOT model and a select few in the adaptation stage. Many of these teachers are just new and just trying to stay afloat this year since they have so many tasks and jobs they have to juggle. Schoology is a new learning management system that Baltimore County adopted over the summer. And since this is brand new to both new teachers and veteran teachers, there is an unfortunate lack of knowledge in how to use it. In addition to this, there's not really that much time available for teachers to explore all of its features. So for my internship, I decided to focus on helping teachers use Schoology more efficiently. I predicted that most people would just use Schoology as a way to maintain grades and access curriculum, but I wanted to help them become familiar with different features such as pushing out assignments and materials to their students and creating small group materials. I really wanted to help teachers use Schoology to transform their learning and not just use it as that substitution tool. My focus was specifically on teachers in grades 1 through 5, since these are the teachers that have to keep an updated gradebook, and their students do have access to the one-to-one devices and to Schoology. My focus also included resource teachers such as special educators and the reading specialists, since they do work so closely with our classroom teachers and even pool some small groups. And I also included the special areas teachers, like the music teacher, art teacher, library media specialist, and so on, because they teach all of the different grades as well. I talked with my principal prior to this internship, and she agreed that this would be an excellent focus for the staff in our school. So she put me to work right away, and the stat teacher and I were asked to do a professional development the first week of school. So during this first session, the stat teacher, Kristen Sluter, and I had to participate in a webinar about setting up the Schoology gradebook prior to giving our PD so we could have notes and information. We used the information that we learned from the webinar to create a professional development for our staff members. During this PD, we delivered information about just simply setting up the gradebook. We also created folders that had materials and resources for them to take with them for future reference. The information that we gave provided how to set up their gradebooks based on either the primary or intermediate settings, and then we also let them know which scale to use. Then we quickly modeled and discussed how to input assignments and how to use the grade exception features, like what to do for missing and excused assignments. Once we went over this, we provided the teachers with time to follow these directions and just actually time to set everything up. Kristen and I were able to walk around, answer questions, and assist those who really needed some extra help. Teachers seemed really overwhelmed with how new everything was, and I don't think the stress of the beginning of the school year really helped much either. But it was helpful to know that my internship would be on Schoology because there were so many questions and a lot of help that people needed. Once the teachers were really able to get into the swing of things, I finally sent out a pre-assessment survey. I wanted people to have a chance to really get to use Schoology and kind of feel it out before I gave this. That way I could really target their needs. This survey had 8 simple questions ranging from times they would like sessions, or if they were even interested, and what they would like to learn about. Based off of the survey that I sent out, I received a surprising 26 responses, which I was so excited about. After analyzing the results from the survey, I learned that Wednesday mornings was the best time for the majority of the staff. Also from this information, I noticed that there were 2 major needs, these being the gradebook and the materials and assignment features. So with this information, I decided to create 4 sessions every 2 weeks, and so I chose that 3 sessions would be on the gradebook and materials, and I purposefully left the last session undecided, and I allowed feedback to drive the topic of this last session, which I'll kind of touch on later. If people couldn't make Wednesday mornings, or if they even just wanted to schedule a different time, I sent out a variety of emails and follow-ups for people so they could schedule individual sessions with me, or we scheduled even different times for meeting with small groups. Once this information was decided, I also created a Schoology group, which is where I housed all of the resources, surveys, and materials that I used for each session. I also included a few discussion boards and areas for people to submit their screenshots and show what you knows after each session. Each session that I held had a fairly similar layout where I sent out emails with information and the materials prior to the meeting. And then I used that flip chart or materials that I gave the staff as a presentation tool where I presented information with either a quick video, tutorial, or tips. Then I left time for the participants to either create the resources, ask questions, or try some new things out. Once each session was over, I gave a survey for my participants to take to give me feedback, and then I asked them to submit screenshots of them using the features on Schoology. As I mentioned before, most people said they needed help with managing their gradebooks and using the materials functions in Schoology. Because of this, I chose the following 2 overarching objectives that I based my sessions off of. These 2 objectives were that staff will access the gradebook and its features to maintain student progress, and staff will use the features of Schoology to design age-appropriate course materials that allow students to interact with content efficiently. Each of my sessions then had some sub-objectives to help reach those 2 overarching goals. My first session was on the gradebook, where I gave tips for setting up the gradebook since there were a lot of different functions that this had. This included things like creating assignments, since a lot of people were confused with the different options to add assignments into their gradebooks. I also gave quick tips on how to do this, and I gave a quick tutorial on the different ways they could organize their gradebooks, such as by date. This sounds kind of simple, but there were a lot of people struggling to just even access their gradebook with ease. Once we kind of went through this, I showed them how to create small groups so they could put in grades from when they pull their small groups in their classrooms, since this is a focus that we have at Logan. On the bottom outsides, you can see that 2 teachers were able to successfully add grades, navigate features that we talked about. On the right, you'll notice that this is a primary gradebook because they use C, D, and P. And on the left, it is an intermediate teacher's gradebook where we use percentages out of 100. And then in the middle, you notice that a special educator shared with me how she created small groups and then gave grades for those groups. The blacked out cells are where the other student's grade won't be affected, but the one in white is where it will only affect that student's grade. This model of professional development seemed to work out pretty nicely. My presentation was quick, and as I was giving information, I heard a lot of, oh, that's how you do it, which was really great to hear because I knew I wasn't wasting anybody's time and I was giving them valuable information. After I gave the quick tutorial session, the participants were also able to just ask me questions since it was such a small group. Once they got their question answered or they felt like they got the information they needed or set up what they needed, they kind of just left on their own. As they were leaving, a few teachers verbally told me the session was helpful and they really liked being able to ask me questions and kind of get those responses right away. I did send out some surveys online where I didn't get many responses, so I just kind of tried to use the combination of the verbal and the online feedback that I did receive. For my second session, I broke this topic into 2 sessions since Schoology has so much to offer in regards to the materials functions. The first session was just simply about how to create and organize folders and how to push out materials to students. I also went through the types of materials they could use with their students, that teachers could use with their students, since there are a lot of different materials that they could use, and a lot of the teachers didn't know what they were. This included things like direction pages, links, websites, articles, discussion boards, and so on. This session looked similar to the last one, where I quickly showed them how they could set this up, and then I walked around to answer questions, and I gave them time to actually set up their own folders for what they needed. There were 4 teachers who showed up, and this outcome kind of made me feel a little bit defeated at the time, but I realized that it was actually really helpful to have a small group so I could help those teachers focus on what they needed. Out of the 4 teachers who did show up, 2 of them were special area teachers. And throughout this internship, I really learned that these sessions were extremely useful to them because they teach almost every student in the school. So the features were helpful in them for planning for each of their different class and really personalize their lessons for each of their classes' needs. In the third session, I continued to talk about the materials. And this session actually ended up not being on the day that I scheduled since nobody showed up to my session, but I did send a follow-up email out to the staff and several people emailed me back, 2 resource teachers and 2 intermediate teachers. So we actually scheduled a meeting for the next day and we went through this information. All 4 of them found this session to be extremely helpful because we talked about how to design course materials and assignments with completion expectations. And what I mean by this is that teachers have the ability to push out materials, but then they can put them in order for students to complete, and they have to follow specific rules, such as having to view or complete items first or in a specific order. They must complete assignments or tests and earn certain scores before moving on. Or if they want to push out a discussion, they have to have students post before viewing others, among so many more options. And within this time, I gave a quick explanation to the usefulness of these features and discussed why and how we could use them and gave a quick tutorial. And then the teachers created a series of assignments on their own using these completion expectations. As you can see on the right, one of my colleagues created a self-paced research project using these completion features. He included directions, websites, articles, and a final assignment. And the students had to complete these tasks in a specific order, take notes, and then answer their response. The teacher who did use this followed up with me at a later date and said that he really enjoyed that he could control the students' completion of these assignments and gave them their directions without really having to walk them through every single step of the way because Schoology helped him really do that. So on to my last session. Before creating this session, I sent an email to my colleagues asking them what they wanted to learn about. And based off of my feedback, I learned that some teachers wanted to learn about having students submit assignments electronically and about giving feedback. This topic I really had to do some extra research on because it's not a feature that I use too often, so I wasn't familiar with. But I found some really awesome stuff and it ended up being very helpful. I found that Schoology has so many more features that I never even knew about, such as creating rubrics, and you can use that electronically to compute scores. You can provide annotations and feedback directly on submitted assignments, and so much more. So this was not only about, this session not only ended up being about submitting assignments and giving feedback, but it turned into a really great discussion where my participants and myself talked about the best ways to provide feedback, when we would use this, how we could use that, and we had a really great discussion talking about the best ways to use these features. Since the session, nobody has really tackled providing feedback through the annotations, but they have used the simple feedback feature using these bubbles. This shows that the teacher has given feedback through the small function on Schoology, so the students can click on this and get the feedback. There were not any teachers that showed me they had their students submitting assignments, but I followed up with a few and they said that they were going to try to use it as the year goes on and the students get more familiar with Schoology. Overall, I did have some ups and downs throughout this internship, but I did learn a few valuable lessons. As a classroom teacher myself, I do know how valuable time is. All teachers' time is so valuable, so as a leader and a teacher, I've especially learned that you have got to work around other people's schedules to meet their needs. Also, obviously, things don't always go as planned, so you have to change things on the fly in order to be successful. I had to make a lot of adjustments throughout this internship, and this isn't new knowledge, but this internship really reinforced this since I consistently had to make changes. I also learned the importance of time management. Managing time is really important because being a leader in the building isn't my only job. I had to manage being a teacher in a new grade, hosting an intern, becoming a tech leader, leading sessions, and even getting married. So in order to get things done, it was really important to prioritize, schedule things, and try to stick to that plan as best as I could. Looking back, I noticed that providing mostly synchronous sessions doesn't necessarily work for most people. And even though I provided flip charts for teachers to access, I think I would try to make it a point to provide more asynchronous material such as screencasts or other things. Many people said that they would like to come to sessions, but when it came down to it, they didn't come. So throughout this, I kind of would randomly go to people's rooms and pop in to see if anybody needed help. And people definitely like when you go to them and they'll ask you questions when you're right there and it's convenient for them. And lastly, I learned that people still need help. Based off of my final survey, people seemed like that they liked the information I provided, but they do still need some additional help. I think in the near future, I'm going to try to continue to pop into people's rooms and maybe even provide sessions or those asynchronous materials as needed. If I were to do this internship again, or even as I continue to be a leader in my school, I think I would make a change in the way I give surveys. I noticed that many people didn't really respond well to the online surveys, but when the paper surveys were out and available, they filled them out and gave me that feedback. I would also use different incentives. Originally, I wanted to make this course, make this into like a course and allow credits to be available, but I didn't really receive enough guidance or assistance, so I wasn't able to do this. So the incentive system that I worked with, which was people submitting screenshots and they would be submitted into a raffle, didn't really catch on like how I wanted. So I would try to change my incentive system the next time I did something like this. And that brings me to my last thing that I would do differently is I would have targeted a smaller group of teachers. I think that if I targeted a smaller group of teachers and not just everybody in general, I think I would have been I think I would have had a higher rate of success with participants. Maybe I could have targeted intermediate grades or primary grades, or made different groups for teachers who were at those different levels. So I think I would just change this so I could be more consistent with the groups that I worked with. After receiving feedback and knowing that people still need help, I'm going to continue to provide information and resources to my staff on Schoology, and I will absolutely continue to make myself available to my colleagues. I'll work with the teachers who want to dig deeper into some of the features, and I know a few of the special area teachers want to look more into the rubrics and page features on Schoology, so I'll continue working with them. And since I'm a more confident leader now, I'll continue to lead professional development as needed and even offer that assistance to teachers. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my presentation about my internship experience. If you'd like to explore my portfolio, where I've included a variety of resources from my Schoology sessions and experiences, you can visit my website at the link below.